Start.
Well, another area that I didn't cover is the enemies, the journalist enemies of Israel in the United States. And they really rose to the fore in the Lebanon War, which created a whole new cadre of anti-Israel journalistic advocates. And so I wrote reviews of people like Jonathan Randall and somebody named Clifton, who wrote a book called God Cried. God was crying in the Lebanon War. He blamed, he didn't like Lebanon much more than the Christian Lebanon much more than he liked Israel. But they were way over the top allegations. He even referred to the PLO as us. So clear was his identification with them. But the most interesting example of these people has been Seymour Hersh. And I was the first person to take him on when he wrote The Samson Option, which was about Israel's nuclear reactor at Dimona, and claimed to be, there'd already been something like 6 books on that subject. But what he brought that was new was, of course, his crazy charges, which typically for Seymour Hersh were based on Conmen. He was an expert in believing in Conmen, and then, whether he believed in them or not, he used them, and he spun their stories as strictly reality. And in the Samson Option, the conman was a fellow named Ari Ben Menashe, who claimed to have been the head of the Mossad, and his father was in the Stern Gang with Shamir. The nonsense this man spouted was endless. And Hersh just accepted it all as the truth. So he spun a whole series of conspiratorial theories about the creation of the nuclear program that involved high-ups in the nuclear establishment in the United States. And he, just to give you an example of how off the wall Hersh was, he couldn't even get the story of Samson right. And he writes in his book that the reason he called the book The Samson Option was because Samson was hurt and engaged as a fighter and hurt in the campaign. And of course, any child who's gone to any kind of Bible school knows that Samson lost his strength because Delilah seduced him into telling her its source in his long hair, and then while he was asleep, his hair was cut off. Even that minimal bit of the story was lost on Seymour Hersh. He couldn't get anything right. He wrote a whole series of books with these based on conmen. So, as I say, I was the first to expose him. Afterwards, that was about when he wrote The Samson Option. I forget the year. Was it around 1970, something like that? And in subsequent years, there were several exposés, and none of them had any effect. He became the leading investigative reporter for the New Yorker. David Remick would just completely dismiss all the evidence of how crazy his books were, by saying the New Yorker employed all these fact checkers. So, the fact checkers of the New Yorker are a joke. First of all, the fact checker wouldn't want to take on Seymour Hersh. Between the two, the fact checker would get fired, not Seymour Hersh. And secondly, how do you fact check? He never has any sources. The sources are anonymous. So, or either, they're anonymous. So maybe he gives some name to the fact checker who calls, and some guy, Hirsch has lined up, some disaffected somebody or other, confirms he said this. And that's the end of the fact checking. The fact checker has no idea of the validity of this, and since there is no validity, Hirsch has spun everything out of his fingers. There's nothing to do. But so he's backed up 100% by the New Yorker. For years, he was their prime investigative reporter, and produced one piece of nonsense after another. So what was really most interesting about Hirsch was not that he was, just a phony writer, but that he was so wildly celebrated by his peers. I think he got over 20 national journalism awards from his peers, including the Pulitzer, from on down. And so I think I wrote that there is no worse indictment of the shoddy standards of American journalism and the political bias of its elite than the flood of honors that standard bearers have bestowed on Seymour Hersh. So Seymour Hersh's real significance is in showing up the journalistic elite of the United States. They don't care if someone has absolutely no journalistic standards, can't produce a coherent or fact-based story. It doesn't matter, because he's anti-American and he's anti-Israel. He has the right attitudes, and that covers for everything. So, Seymour Hersh has won in this exchange, but in the long run, he's got to be a big loser if anybody ever, honestly, in the journalistic profession in years ahead, looks at that record.